I stumbled across a photograph from 1859, a frozen moment in time, where a woman stood perfectly still. Her face was calm, her pose rigid, as if she were a statue carved from the past. But then I noticed her eyes, those haunting, piercing eyes. They weren't looking at the camera. They were looking somewhere else, somewhere impossible. What I discovered about this photo sent chills down my spine, and it's a story you won't believe until you hear it. Stick with me as we unravel the mystery of where her gaze led, and why it changes everything we thought we knew about this image. I was browsing an old archive, the kind where dust clings to every page, when I found it, a daguerreotype from 1859. The photograph was small, encased in a tarnished silver frame, its edges worn by time. The woman in the image stood alone, her dress heavy with Victorian lace, her hands clasped tightly. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, under the sepia tones. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. They didn't meet the camera's lens, as was customary in portraits of that era. Instead, they seemed to stare past it, into something, or someone beyond. I felt a shiver, as if she were looking right at me. The archive was silent, but her gaze screamed a story. I had to know more. I began tracing the photograph's origins, digging through records. Who was she? Why was her expression so intense? The deeper I went, the stranger the clues became. Each document hinted at a life that didn't fit the serene image she projected. The photograph bore a faint inscription on the back, barely legible. Eleanor, 1859. No last name, no location, just a date and a name. I scoured historical records for an Eleanor from that year, but the name was common, and the trail was cold. The archive's curator, an elderly man with a passion for old photos, offered a clue. He said daguerreotypes were rare, expensive, and often reserved for significant moments. This one, he noted, was unusually sharp for its time. Eleanor's eyes were so clear, it was as if the camera had captured her soul. I couldn't shake the feeling that her gaze held a secret. I spent hours staring at the photo, trying to decipher where she was looking. Was it a person? A place? The mystery consumed me. Every night, I'd return to her image, her eyes pulling me deeper into the unknown. I began researching the photographer, a man named Thomas Wren, known for his work in London's high society. His records were meticulous, detailing clients and sessions, but Eleanor's name appeared nowhere. It was as if this photo was a private endeavor, unlisted in his official logs. I found a journal entry from Wren, dated 1859, mentioning a peculiar session with a woman who refused to look at the camera. Could it be her? The entry described her as nervous, her hands trembling as she posed. Wren wrote that she whispered something about watching him, but he dismissed it as nerves. My heart raced as I read this. Who was him? Why was she watching? The journal offered no answers, only more questions. I felt like I was chasing a ghost through time. I contacted a historian specializing in Victorian photography, hoping for insight. She explained that early cameras required subjects to hold still for minutes, making candid expressions rare. Eleanor's gaze, so deliberate and off-center, was unusual. The historian suggested I examine the background of the photo for clues. I hadn't noticed it before, but behind Eleanor was a faint outline of a window. It was blurred, but I could make out a shape, a figure perhaps. The more I studied it, the more it looked like a silhouette. My mind raced with possibilities. Was someone standing there, just out of sight? Was that where her eyes were fixed? I needed to enhance the image to know for sure. I sent the daguerreotype to a digital restoration expert, who used modern software to sharpen the details. The results were astonishing. The window in the background revealed a street scene, frozen in 1859 London. There, in the corner of the frame, was a man, his face obscured but his posture rigid. Eleanor's eyes aligned perfectly with his position. It was no coincidence. She was looking at him. My pulse quickened as I realized this wasn't just a portrait. It was a moment of connection, captured forever. But who was he? Why did she look at him with such intensity? The restored image offered no names, only a clearer mystery. I had to find out who this man was. I dove into London's historical records, searching for clues about the street visible through the window. Old maps from 1859 pinpointed the location to a wealthy district near Mayfair. The street was lined with grand houses, home to the elite. I wondered if Eleanor was part of this world, or an outsider captured in it. The man in the background wore a top hat, suggesting wealth or status. Was he her husband? A lover? An enemy? The lack of answers frustrated me, but her eyes kept me going. They were so alive, so full of purpose. I felt like she was urging me to keep searching. Every lead I followed seemed to loop back to her gaze. A breakthrough came when I found a newspaper article from 1859, buried in an online archive. It mentioned a scandal involving a woman named Eleanor Grayson, who vanished after a high society ball. The article described her as enigmatic, with eyes that could pierce a man's soul. My heart skipped a beat. Was this my Eleanor? The article hinted at a forbidden romance, but details were scarce. The man involved was unnamed, described only as a prominent figure. I cross-referenced the ball's guest list with Wren's clients. No matches, but the timing felt too close to ignore. I imagined Eleanor standing in that studio, her eyes locked on someone she couldn't have. The photo was starting to feel like a confession. I visited a photography museum to learn more about daguerreotypes and their secrets. An expert there showed me how light and shadow could reveal hidden details. Under ultraviolet light, the photo revealed faint scratches near the window, marks that weren't visible before. They formed a word. Forever. My breath caught in my throat. Had Eleanor scratched this into the plate herself? Was it a message to the man in the background? The museum expert was as stunned as I was. She said such marks were rare, often deliberate. I felt closer to Eleanor than ever, as if her voice was reaching across centuries. But the word forever only deepened the mystery. I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the window. I tracked down a genealogist who specialized in Victorian London families. She helped me narrow down potential candidates based on the ball's guest list. One name stood out: Lord Henry Ashford, a wealthy bachelor known for his charm and secrecy. Rumors swirled about his involvement with a woman who disappeared. Could he be the man in the photo? I found a portrait of Ashford in an old book. His posture matched the silhouette perfectly. My hands shook as I compared the images. Eleanor's eyes were fixed on him. I was sure of it. But why? What had happened between them? I returned to the archive, hoping to find more of Wren's journals. A dusty volume mentioned a woman who visited his studio alone, late at night. The entry was cryptic, but it noted her insistence on a specific pose. Wren wrote that she seemed haunted, her eyes fixed on the window. My heart raced. This had to be Eleanor. The journal mentioned a man waiting outside, pacing nervously. Was this Ashford? The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more. I contacted a descendant of Wren's, who had inherited his personal effects. She promised to search for anything related to Eleanor. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop staring at the photo. Her eyes seemed to follow me, urging me to keep going. The descendant sent me a scanned letter from Wren, written to a friend in 1860. It described a client who left him shaken. Her eyes saw things I could not, he wrote. She looked through the world, into another. I felt a chill reading those words. Was Eleanor's gaze more than just a look? I began exploring spiritualism, common in Victorian England. Many believed photographs could capture more than the physical: souls, spirits, even truths. Was Eleanor trying to tell me something beyond the frame? I found a book on Victorian photography that mentioned ghostly images, where unintended figures appeared. The man in the window, was he one of them? I decided to recreate the conditions of the photograph to understand Eleanor's perspective. Using a map of 1859 London, I located the exact street and building where Wren's studio stood. The building was long gone, replaced by modern offices, but I stood where the window would have been. I imagined Eleanor inside, staring out at me. The thought gave me goosebumps. I took a photo from a spot, hoping to capture something, anything. When I reviewed the image, the street was empty, but I felt her presence. Her eyes were burned into my mind. I knew I was close to uncovering her story, but I needed more evidence. I found a collection of letters in an online archive, written by a woman named Margaret, a friend of Eleanor's. They were addressed to a cousin and mentioned Eleanor's dangerous obsession with a man. Margaret warned that Eleanor was risking everything: her reputation, her family, her life. The letter stopped abruptly in 1859, the year of the photo. My stomach churned as I read the last one, which hinted at a secret meeting. Was the photograph taken during that meeting? Was the man in the window the one she was risking it all for? I felt like I was living her story, her eyes pulling me deeper into her world. I contacted a forensic analyst to examine the daguerreotype for hidden details. Using advanced imaging, they found traces of another figure in the studio, barely visible. It was a man, standing just out of frame, his hand raised as if signaling. My heart pounded. Was this the moment Eleanor looked at him? The analyst said the figure was likely erased deliberately, a common practice to hide unwanted elements. But why erase him? Was it to protect his identity? Or hers? I felt like I was uncovering a conspiracy, hidden in plain sight. Eleanor's eyes were the key, and I was determined to follow them. I began researching Ashford's life after 1859. Records showed he left London suddenly, traveling to America, where he lived quietly until his death. His letters from that time were melancholic, filled with regret. One mentioned a woman he could not save. My throat tightened as I read it. Was he talking about Eleanor? The timing of his departure matched her disappearance. I imagined them standing in that studio, their eyes locked in a moment of forbidden love. The photograph was their last connection, a secret they couldn't speak. I felt a pang of sadness for them, trapped by their time. I found a diary in a private collection, written by a maid who worked in Ashford's household. She described a woman who visited him in secret, always at night. The maid called her the lady with the piercing eyes. My hands trembled as I read. It had to be Eleanor. The diary mentioned a night when the woman left in tears, saying she'd never return. The date matched the photograph's creation. I pictured Eleanor standing in the studio, her heart breaking as she looked at Ashford through the window. The word forever scratched into the plate. Was it her final message to him? I reached out to a Victorian literature expert, hoping for context on forbidden love in that era. She explained that women like Eleanor faced ruin for defying societal norms. A romance with a man like Ashford, if he was married or of higher status, would have been scandalous. The expert suggested the photograph might have been a defiant act, a way for Eleanor to claim her story. Her eyes, fixed on him, were a silent rebellion. I felt a surge of admiration for her courage. But what happened after the photo was taken? Why did she vanish? The answers were still out of reach. I returned to the restored daguerreotype, focusing on the man in the window. His silhouette was clearer now, his face still obscured. I noticed something new. A ring on his hand, glinting faintly. I cross-referenced it with Ashford's portraits, which showed a similar ring, a family heirloom. The connection was undeniable. Eleanor was looking at Ashford, and he was looking back. The photograph captured a moment of unspoken truth between them. But why was it hidden? Why was she erased from history? I felt like I was on the verge of something huge, but the final piece was missing. I found a record of a missing persons case from 1859. Filed by Eleanor's sister. It described her as lost to the world after a night in London. The report mentioned a photograph, taken just before she vanished. My heart raced. This was it. The report hinted at foul play, but no evidence was found. I wondered if Ashford was involved, or if he was as heartbroken as his letters suggested. Eleanor's eyes in the photo seemed to accuse and mourn at the same time. I felt like she was begging me to tell her story. I was determined to honor her, to bring her truth to light. I contacted a descendant of Eleanor's family, hoping for personal records. They shared a family legend about a woman who followed her heart and paid the price. The story matched Eleanor's, down to the mysterious photograph. The descendant had a locket with Eleanor's initials, passed down through generations. Inside was a tiny copy of the daguerreotype. My breath caught. It was the same image, her eyes just as piercing. The locket confirmed her identity, but not her fate. The family believed she ran away, but I suspected something darker. Her gaze in the photo felt like a plea for justice. I revisited Wren's journals, looking for overlooked details. A passing mention caught my eye. A client who paid extra to destroy the negative of a photograph. The date matched Eleanor's session. My stomach dropped. Why destroy the negative? Was it to hide the man in the window? I imagined Ashford, desperate to protect his reputation, demanding the evidence be erased. But Eleanor's copy survived, her eyes preserving the truth. I felt a chill, realizing how close this story came to being lost forever. Her gaze was a beacon, guiding me through the darkness of history. I found a legal document from 1860, a will from Ashford's estate. It left a small fortune to an unnamed woman, described as my greatest regret. My heart ached as I read it. Was this his attempt to atone for Eleanor's fate? The will offered no clues about her whereabouts, only deepening the mystery. I pictured her in the studio, knowing this moment might be her last with him. Her eyes, so full of longing, seemed to hold a lifetime of unspoken words. I felt a responsibility to her, to tell the world what happened, but I needed more proof. I consulted a paranormal investigator, desperate for any angle. He suggested the photograph might hold energy, a trace of Eleanor's emotions. While skeptical, I let him examine it. He claimed to feel a presence in her eyes, a sadness that lingered. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I couldn't deny the power of her gaze. It was as if she was still here, watching me unravel her story. The investigator suggested a seance, but I declined. I wanted facts, not feelings. Still, his words stayed with me, making her eyes even more haunting. I found a shipping record from 1859, showing a woman named Eleanor boarding a ship to America. My heart raced. Could she have escaped? The record listed her as traveling alone, under an assumed name. But the trail ended there, with no trace of her in America. I wondered if Ashford helped her flee, or if she ran from him. Her eyes in the photo didn't look like those of someone escaping. They looked trapped. I felt a pang of frustration, knowing I might never find her. But her gaze kept me searching, refusing to let me give up. I contacted a graphologist to analyze the forever scratched into the daguerreotype. She confirmed it was written by a woman's hand, likely under duress. The strokes were shaky, as if carved in a moment of desperation. My mind raced with possibilities. Did Eleanor scratch it as a message to Ashford, or was it a cry for help? The word felt like a key, but it unlocked nothing without context. I imagined her in the studio, her eyes locked on him, etching her final word into history. I was determined to understand what it meant. I found a memoir by a Victorian journalist, mentioning a scandal that rocked London in 1859. It described a woman who vanished after defying her family for love. The details aligned with Eleanor's story, though her name was omitted. The memoir hinted at a cover-up orchestrated by powerful men. Was Ashford one of them? I felt a surge of anger on Eleanor's behalf. Her eyes in the photo seemed to demand justice, to expose the truth. I was closer than ever, but the final piece eluded me. I couldn't stop now, not when her gaze was so clear. I returned to the restored daguerreotype, zooming in on the window. A new detail emerged, a reflection in the glass, faint but unmistakable. It was Eleanor's face, mirrored back, her eyes meeting her own. My breath caught. Was she looking at herself, not Ashford? The realization hit me hard. Maybe the photograph was her way of confronting her fate, of claiming her story. The word forever took on new meaning, a promise to herself, to be remembered. I felt tears well up, overwhelmed by her strength. Her eyes were no longer a mystery, they were a testament. I compiled all my findings into a single narrative, piecing together Eleanor's life. She was a woman trapped by her time, in love with a man she couldn't have. The photograph was her final act, a way to preserve their connection. Her eyes, fixed on the window, captured a truth she couldn't speak. Whether she fled or met a darker fate, I'll never know for sure. But her gaze lives on, a silent cry across centuries. I felt honored to tell her story, to give her a voice. The photograph, once a mystery, was now a monument to her courage. As I sit here, the daguerreotype in my hands, I feel Eleanor's eyes on me. They're no longer haunting, but hopeful. I've spent months chasing her story, and though some questions remain, I've found her truth. She was more than a frozen image. She was a woman who loved fiercely, who defied her world. Her gaze, once a puzzle, is now a call to remember her. I'll never look at old photographs the same way again. They're not just images, they're stories, waiting to be told. Eleanor's eyes taught me that. And now, I pass her story to you, hoping you'll see what I saw. If Eleanor's story moved you, if her eyes left you haunted, join me on this journey. Subscribe to my channel for more forgotten stories, hidden in the shadows of history. Hit that button, and let's uncover the past together. Who knows what secrets we'll find next?